Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Digital Classicist Seminar. I'm Eleanor Robson. I'm chairing this afternoon's session, and it's a great pleasure to welcome Julian Bogdani from La Sapienza University in Rome. Julian is a classical archaeologist by training, but has done field work everywhere from Albania to Uzbekistan. If you don't know where it beginning with Z yet. Including a lot of very interesting work in Iraqi Kurdistan, and picked up lots of digital methodologies along the way, including GIS. And he's now working on a project at La Sapienza, which he's going to talk to us about today. So Julian wants me to emphasize to you that he's very much here to talk about the computational side, and he's not a specialist in Coptic literature himself. I think that's true of most of us in the room, so you're safe. We're not going to ask you any difficult questions about that. So it's a real pleasure to welcome you here, Julian, and we'll ask you to talk for 40-45 minutes, and then we'll have some questions. And I shall hand over to you. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Well, thank you for accepting my abstract and for being here today and giving me the opportunity of introducing this project.
Do you want to screen share?
Yes.
Oh, yes, yes,
Okay,
yes, of course.
let's quickly do that.
Okay. So the opportunity, as I was saying, to introduce you the work that we are doing in Rome on this project that is called Paths, and it's about the digital archaeological atlas of Coptic literature for the study of late antique Egypt. These are not words that go together well, so I need to explain a little bit. What does this mean? Archaeology, literature, all this stuff together. So I'm going to introduce briefly our project and to describe the different aspects of our project, putting together people with different backgrounds and with different competencies. And also the methodology, what have been achieved so far, the methodology behind our work and the already online available products, so to say. And of course, a brief introduction of the Archaeological Atlas of Coptic Literature, which was put online on February in a first draft, of course, and some GIS and cartographic experiments that we are doing these weeks. And we'd love to have some feedback on this from you or the other audience. First of all, the project Paths, the short form of a big, much longer title, Tracking Papyrus and Parchment Path, an Archaeological Atlas of Coptic Literature. It's about literary texts in their geographical context, production, copying, usage, dissemination, and storage. This is an ERC-funded project led by Paola Buzzi, which is the PI at Sapienza University of Rome. We started working on November 2016, and we are supposed to stop in at the end of October 2021. So we are about at the middle of the project by now. And the project is aimed at providing a depth diachronic understanding and also effective representation, geographical representation of the Coptic literary production. The main product that is expected from us is this, of course, Atlas, which is an online tool that should be searchable at different chronological, regional, and thematic levels, including also the following points that you can read in here. So the places where Coptic manuscripts have been found, stored, and or produced. These are monastic settlements, episcopal sees, tombs, urban context, everything. And we are trying to provide photograph, plans, map, and when available, 3D reconstruction of these places. Of course, we need to provide other works, literary works, in combination of which a specific text was transmitted. So we're trying to cluster somehow this text and to provide a deeper cultural context for this literature. And also the plausible place where selected group of works have been conceived. Actually, we know almost nothing about the archaeological, or let's say geographic context of this kind of literature. We have some texts that we know nothing where they have found in most cases. So it's not an easy task to put them back in the Egyptian territory. That's what we're trying to do. A thorough description of the codicological features of these manuscripts. Usually the Coptic literature have been studied from the literary part. So the text itself with no dimension, with no material dimension. For the first time, we are trying to provide a codicological description of every manuscript, a piece of manuscript that has been found, and try to put this in a place. And also information of people, persons or copies, their relationship, professions, time of execution, etc. So we're trying to trace the material process of the crafting of these special archaeological objects, which are the manuscripts. To outline very briefly the Coptic literature, I'm not an expert on this, of course, just to give some coordinates. What do we mean by Coptic literature? We mean texts written on manuscripts in Coptic language, which are not documentary texts. This called is literary texts. These are mainly of religious content, and the chronology is between the 3rd and the 13th centuries of the Common Era. The 3rd century marks the first attestation of this somehow new language, which is not that new because it's the last stage of the Egyptian language. And the 13th century marks the very end of it, when all these texts were recopied and retranslated in Arabic. The manuscripts which held these texts, we call these codicological units, have been in most cases dismembered and scattered in many libraries and collections, and also excavation deposit nowadays. So they have been through a long history of market history also, and have been scattered all over Europe and America also. The reconstruction of the original books, the codicological units, is so often very difficult, and requires an accurate exam of text, but also supports palaeographic elements and also the archaeological and cultural context of production. I've introduced here the concept of works, author, manuscripts, and collection. I'll go through this in the next slides. Well, collection are the most easiest thing to understand. We have up to now registered about 180 modern collections that preserve Coptic manuscripts or fragments of Coptic manuscripts, but we expect this list to grow. PATH is not a new project because, yes, it is new, but it relies on the shoulders of the experience of what is called the CMCL, the Corpus dei Manoscritti Copti Literari, which is the life work of Tito Orlandi with an online database, which is founded in the 90s, but he is working on this for many decades now. The CMCL is an extraordinary effort to reconstruct, first of all, codicological units from these manuscript fragments scattered all over the world. He has traveled with his car and his camera and photographed and documented manuscripts everywhere and put this together in this database. He has also provided these units with unique identifiers, which is most important for our reasons, and also provides stable identifiers called clavis coptica for literary works and authors, literary works as abstract things. Clavis coptica was shaped after the example of the CPG, the Clavis Patrum Graecorum and the Clavis Patrum Latinarum. So we have one also for Coptic literature. Also, these websites provide digital resources on the history of literature, Coptic grammar, modern bibliography, etc. Orlandi has also used this database to publish some electronic text, Coptic electronic text. This is the starting point of our project. that, as I said, combines, it's a multidisciplinary project that combines philology, codicology, palaeography, archaeology, archaeometry, and digital humanities that are more or less the glue that keeps all of these things together, but also provides some methodological skeleton where to build this kind of research. First of all, philology is about works. We're trying to complete a complete census of literary works which are written in Coptic, based, of course, on the experience of the CMCL, but expanding further this. But also with an effort for the first time to provide a classification, which hopefully will be the backbone of an attempt to write a history of Coptic literature, which doesn't exist yet. It's not an easy task for the moment. By now, we have in our database, which is publicly available, we'll see this after, about 1,250 works, which has been filed and are being described, actually. And we do provide stable identifiers and URIs for all these works. Works are tightly connected with authors. We're also compiling a complete census of authors. We have about, by now, 113 authors attested in Coptic manuscript edition, and we're providing also for these stable identifiers and URIs. We'll see this after. The relation between authors and texts is a little bit more complicated than we used to be in the CMCL, because we had a one-to-one relation in the old database, one author, one literary text. We're trying to go deeper into this and to try to register for each work what is probably its real author and what are the stated author behind that. Because sometimes in paratext we read the name of the pretended author, but we do file this, we do register this in order to have the possibility to have some analysis on this issue. A special kind of texts in these manuscripts are titles. Coptic titles, which can be divided in initial titles, final titles, section headings, etc. We have about 700 of them, are something particular. They grow sometimes they accompany the works, but there's not a unique relation. Sometimes titles are big enough to be considered as small works on their own. So they are given also a kind of clavis, which is an identifier. We're trying to. Thanks to this database, we can now, for example, check all the titles that in several manuscripts have been related to the same work. Also, the philological part of this project deals with colophons, which are paratext that gives us very useful information about text, but also about the writing support, the manuscript itself. They do provide information on people who wrote them, people who donated, people who paid for them, but also information on places when these manuscripts were crafted, when they were donated, when they were found sometimes. So from the colophons, we're extracting, of course, we're giving the full text in Coptic form and in English translation, but we are going further on this kind of special text and using a TI-based schema to annotate persons, place, and roles in order to make some stronger connections between text, manuscripts, and, of course, the places that we are registering. From also the most important part, of course, of the codicology or the palaeography part is the manuscript one. We're dealing with this for the first time in this way. We have more or less 6,200 codicological units registered, but this is going to change in the near future as soon as these are being studied. And we have developed for the first time a descriptive protocol of the codicological features. Up to now, we had no description, no examination, no study of the material part of the text of Coptic literature. This is the first attempt, of course, based in the tradition of Greek and Latin palaeography, and our database is has been shaped to register these material things. For each manuscript, we of course record a series of identifiers, our own, which is this, we call it CLM, but also the identifier when available from the CMCL. The CMCL is just a part of our database because it doesn't not consider the single fragments. Orlandi used to give an identifier only when he fully identified a manuscript. We're giving identifiers to each fragment, and then after the study, we stick together different fragments or take them apart. It depends on the study. But at the first moment, everything has its name, so it can be considered and studied and cited. We give identifiers from other databases like Trismegistos, LDAB, etc. And we give information about the modern map where these are located, shelf marks, the libraries and the collections where the fragments that are composing this manuscript are located by now, information on dialects that are used in the text, on datation. We give some, when that's possible, that colophons gives us are very helpful in this dates from where this manuscript has been written, but also palaeography can help in this. We connect these manuscripts to relevant places. We have up to now, we'll see this later, try to define 3 types of connection between a manuscript and a place. We have a production place, we have a storage place that you usually know by a colophons. We might have a discovery place when we know from archaeological records that these manuscripts were found in an actual site. Of course, we give a description of the book itself and on the page, description of the columns, on the margins, on dimensions of the leaves, and etc. On the text, and also of the structure of the single quires. We have developed this descriptive protocol, visual descriptive protocol, to able to describe each quire that our manuscript is made of. Also, signature, pagination, foliation, ruling, pricking, the critical signs, hands of scribes that have worked, that have been identified by the examination, the manufacture of the roll, presence of collages, etc., dimensions, and also book bindings. We have a person that is working for the first time on the study of book bindings of Coptic books. We thought we have few information of this, but we were discovering hundreds of instances of preserved book bindings. And also additional information, you'll have, I guess, in 2 weeks, a talk on chemical analysis that we are performing on some of these manuscripts. So we have had a section about the inks and pigments that are used. These are scientific analysis made on chemical basis. We're trying to have clusters of different inks used in manuscripts, trying to probably find a common origin for groups of manuscripts. We are having some interesting results from this. The archaeological part is about places. We're trying to catalog, to make a catalog of late antique Egyptian sites. We have 370 of them, but it's still growing. And we are, of course, providing identifiers for this. Well, archaeology is connected, of course, to geography, because each of these sites have been provided by geographical coordinates, and we are representing these sites on our map. These are, of course, screenshots of our online database. You can find on this slide the full URL, and you can see this on the browser, of course. Well, what are places? Because from the archaeological point of view, there is no mismatch about places. Places is something that you can go there, you can see, you can document, you can photograph, you can collect pottery on it, you can do some topography, etc. We all agree on this. Well, paths, places are all this, but not only, because when you speak to philologists, when you speak to people who study literature, places do not have a spatial dimension. So we had for Egypt important publication about the geography of Coptic period. We have important books that provided us with important, let's say, gazetteers, place names used in, for instance, Arabic or Coptic documents. But all this missed a geographical and archaeological dimension. No one of these books was accompanied by a map, let's say. So we're trying to match the things together and provide for each place an actual archaeological background. So we are taking into consideration all sites that have not provided manuscripts, of course, but that we know that have important phases in late antique period, because we cannot reconstruct the geography of Egypt on the basis of only places that have recovered manuscript, because it would be nonsense. But also we are trying to building other geographies. For instance, the geography of political or religious center of Coptic Egypt, the episcopal sees, which is not an easy thing to achieve, and also the toponyms that we are registering in our colophons that actually lack a proper geographical space. So every instance of these points is a place that we are taking into consideration. They are not equal, they are not on the same level, but we are trying to fulfill this gap with information provided from archaeological or palaeological records. More or less, this is the schema of our description of places. We do provide, of course, toponyms in different language: Egyptian, Arabic, in transliteration and in original form, Greek, in Coptic, and we have a default, let's say, well-known label for these places, which is in plain English. We do provide identifier, our own, but also Trismegistos, Pleiades, team references, etc. This is important in order to have links to other database, also to get to and for data in automated manner. And we provide information about the positioning. Coordinates, of course, were available, but also the ancient administrative position by providing the region, the nomos, or the province, or the ancient religious position, episcopal see, yes or not, episcopal see from which year, etc. Notes, sources, if it contains any monastery, etc. And of course, a general description of the, let's say, Coptic period. It's better to say late antique or Byzantine period. For each place, we're giving the typology, the chronology, the dating criteria, and also a description, which is always very short. But we cannot conceive, as I said before, the Coptic phases without taking into consideration the previous phases. Let's take, for instance, the situation of Western Thebes. We cannot consider the single cell mounds that are scattered all over the Theban mountains without considering that these were before a rich necropolis of Egyptian period and also in Roman times. So for each site, we are also given a full credit of the other and description of the other periods in order to be able to trace the history of a place through history and get into a better understanding of the geography of the later phases. For instance, we cannot consider a Coptic church only for its own, when it's built inside an Egyptian temple, for example. The people who went there had in front of their eyes their situation. We cannot ignore that. So we're also describing the pharaonic temple when the church is built inside. And we're also taking into consideration the reuse of space in different spaces. This is an important thing. So I'm finished now in describing the main entities that we are considering in our database, which are, of course, places, manuscripts, works, titles, colophon, persons, collection, shelf marks, and authors. But these entities do not live separate one from each other, but they are connected through a network of connections. For instance, manuscripts might have 0, 1, or many colophons that mentions one or more places that are preserved in shelf marks, etc. manuscripts may be created in one place, discovered in another place, and we know they have been stored in many places, sometimes when we are lucky, of course. And we know manuscript might have one or more works that might have one or more authors, etc., etc., etc. This is more or less the general map of our information system. When you go on our website, when you check our atlas, this is the very basis of the structure. I'm sorry. Okay. From the technical point of view, this is based on basically a web database, a relational database, which is the beating heart of the entire system when we work on a daily basis and fill in the information, delete, update, etc. And there is the atlas, which is this webpage that I'm going to see now. That is just a wrapper. It pulls the data from the central database, but it has not a life on its own. It depends on this. Of course, we are also developing other tools and repositories where we store our data. We have, for example, GIS data repository, which is conserved on GitHub. We have, of course, an institutional portal with news, etc. We describe our works. A text repository where we put in, for example, the few texts that we are considering, mainly all colophons, all titles, and some few literary texts, but we're not about publishing text. A tools repository when we publish some tools that we have developed, IT tools that maybe might be useful for other people that are doing similar things. We'll see this in brief. And the thing that I like most, that is the documentation portal, which is still in a very early stage, but I'm wishing that it is going to grow in the future. It takes a trace of everything that we are doing. Probably many information are wrong, are going to be updated, etc. We are trying to put here everything. Each field of our database is described here. Why we decided to store that kind of information, and also from the technical point of view, how we do store that kind of information. It's an integer or character field, etc. Everything. So also the schema of the SQL schema of our database can be found here. So you can probably replicate it. Well, that is the theoretical background or the methodology that we have developed. But what is available so far? Well, of course, the online database. We can go on this link, but you need a username and password to access this, where all these data are preserved, and also the archaeological atlas, which is open access. It is online, as I said, since February of this year. It can be reached at atlas.paths-erc.eu. And the documentation website, which is still in an early phase of development, docs.paths-erc.eu, and also our tools and text repository on GitHub. The web database is nothing special, let's say, because it's just a relational RDBMS, a relational database managing system. I've used this the software that I've been developing in the last 10 years, which is called Bradipus, and it's which is just an interface, a web interface to any kind of relational database managing system. We're using this because it's very easy to implement and very elastic and can be adapted from excavation databases to philological excavation or museum collections, etc. We just set up and go. And some, as I said, standalone tools. Well, this is most interesting. This is called CMCL to Unicode. As I said, Tito Orlandi has published in his CMCL database many Coptic texts. Well, he worked before the Unicode was set up for Coptic language. So he invented a sort of beta codish encoding system for Coptic language. Also, he developed a font for this for his system. Well, we have, of course, developed a converter that gets this beta codish system and translates it to Unicode and the way back around in order to be able to migrate all these data to our new web tools. Well, Another tool is this. It's called Choir Matrix. It's just a very easy way to encode the layout of choirs. It has a notation system which is well documented online that permits to build these kinds of matrices with visual description of the choirs, even with missing leaves, etc. This has already been forked and used by other projects. You can use it in your own projects. It's just a clone, and it's not. It depends on no other libraries. And also, we have developed this tool. We just connect to our database of colophon texts that are published, and perform some easy queries and extract people, places, etc. on the basis of the TI schema that I showed before. All this stuff is it's described somehow in our documentation portal, of course, when you can find also the user's handbook. We have completed the part of the manuscript, which is the biggest one, and also the part of the places. We're still working on the other parts, but the most important parts are well described. And of course, as I said before, the database structure of this, also from the technical point of view, this SQL code with inline comments, so you can fork it if you need. And lately, we have this GIS section where we are registering GIS data. We are working also with our students at the Sapienza University of Rome. We are collecting cartographic resources about Egypt and trying to georeference this and put this in open repositories, and when possible, when copyright permission is available, publish this as web mapping services over internet for our own tools, but also for general purpose. So you can connect to the source and use this in your web applications or GIS platforms. Up to now, thanks to the open archive of the Perry Castaneda in Texas, we have downloaded and georeferenced a big quantity of maps, UK maps, United States maps, Egyptian maps, etc. These are base maps drawn in different periods of time, from the beginning of the 20th century up to now. We have not a complete coverage of Egypt. We have published what we have actually, but if we get more, we'll publish more of this. And also we're trying to get some repositories of vector data. This is still an early stage of development, and we have published so far a list GIS files, GeoJSON and CSV files with a list of Coptic monastery. This is not a work of ours. We have downloaded from another site. We have given credits in there, but we have re-elaborated this and made it just GIS ready, and then we published. Also, we're publishing some original work. For example, this map of the journey of the Holy Family in Egypt with a full range of sources for this. This is done by students of ours who did the thesis on this and been publishing on the web. Well, as I said, at atlas.paths-erc.eu, you can find the first draft of our atlas. Of course, an atlas is a map. So the most part of sites, not all of them, because for many of them we still don't have geographic coordinates, can be showed on a map and fully searched. Well, as I said, manuscripts and places might be connected by a rather complicated network. A manuscript has a production places when we're lucky, and we know this, might have one or more storage places, because we know of some manuscripts that have traveled from one monastery to another, and we trace this travel. And might have archaeological discovery places. Lately, the Polish team has discovered in situ 3 books, which is very important archaeological discovery, because we give for the first time an actual archaeological context of these texts. And of course, we are able now to trace this different kind of relationship on the map. We can visualize by using this easy function, which are the saved queries that we have built, but you can build, of course, your own. We've just built some. And you can click and see on the map the discovery places of manuscript or the storage places of the manuscripts, and also the production places of these manuscripts. Of course, these are real-time made maps. So as soon as our research advances, they're going to change, of course. We have not fully described the manuscript. We are at about 15% of them. So this amount of data is going to enhance in the 2.5 years. By the way, we're not going to fully describe all 6,000 manuscripts at the end of our project. It's huge work, but in the last years, of course, we'll continue. Well, places can be searched by toponyms. The first question here is, what toponyms? Well, we're trying to use all toponyms. Since we are finding toponyms in variants, in different languages and in different scripts, you are able to type it in Greek or in Coptic or in Arabic, and you should be able to find the related toponym. So we are matching the different variants and trying to put these together. Well, it's not a work that we've started from scratch, because as you know, Trismegistos have done huge work on this. We're adding, for example, the variants that are tested in the colophons or in the titles. This is our original part of the work. So actually, the atlas supports the search in manuscripts and languages. As you can see here, in the main menu of the atlas are described the main entities that our database relies upon: manuscripts, works, authors, etc., etc. For each of these entities, we give a full description of what we intend with this, what is the meaning, what are you recording, what is there and what will be there in the next years, etc. We do provide some search tools like show all or simple and advanced search, but the most important thing is, from our point of view, is a sort of guided tours using the saved queries. We do provide some clues to get in our database without being necessarily an expert of Coptic literature. For example, you can see here, just to give an example, but you can look at this afterwards when I've finished more in deep. An example of the saved query about minor dialects, which are manuscripts which are not written in Boairic or Sairic or Nicopolitan, but in some minor dialects. You can view this as a list, or if you prefer, you can click on this button and view this result on the map. And of course, the different colors of the dots means the different kind of relation. These are places that have where manuscripts of minor dialects have been produced, and these are places when these manuscripts have been stored sometimes. Well, it works like this. There is a continuous connection between the two parts, and you can browse the database from whenever parts, everything is linked together, following the map that I showed you before. When it comes to geography, we might say, what geography? So we're trying also to provide different base maps. As I said before, we're developing base maps of our own by using different topographical coverages in different periods. This is the Survey of Egypt, which is very well known for people who do Egyptian studies, because it's a very well documented cartography of the 50s, more or less, but even before. Of course, we are implementing current topography, OpenStreetMaps, Google Satellite, and Bing Maps, etc. Have been a very useful source of information for the localization of many places, but also you're able to link at the works of other people, like the Ancient World Mapping Center. We are getting tiled maps from them, and also the Imperium base map, which is provided by Pelagios, but maybe it's offline in this day, but also the Digital Atlas of Roman Empire. It's the same base map. Well, you can use this different base map just by clicking the layers menu. As I said, we are working also in historical cartography. we're trying to get some older maps like this one, which is had been designed by Aerosmith in 1907, but it comes from sources which are a little bit earlier and gives us a very detailed description of the delta of Egypt, which is quite different from what we can see today. It's a little bit more near to the late antique period that the one that we see on Google Maps today. And we are working actually on these beautiful maps that were designed by Pierre Jacotin, who followed the Napoleonic expeditions. We are cropping on this, we are georeferencing this, and we are going to publish this as web mapping services in order to be easily used on web applications or also GIS platforms. What I'm finishing my presentation with some new experiments, as I told you. This is very early release. It's published, of course, but we're still working on that, and feedback is very welcomed. We have developed what we call the simple vectorization protocol, which is meant to be a protocol for georeferencing and for vectorization legacy data in a very easy way, in order to have a unified geographical data entry system that can be used by almost anybody. We're trying to use this by first-year students, and we have very good results. So they need also a couple of hours of training, and they are able to do. What is this protocol about? This is about vectorization. So we take maps, plans already published, and we try to put these on the right place in the geographical context by georeferencing them, and then drawing on vectors, vectorizing. For each vector that we draw, we provide identification, location, state of preservation, the reference to the section plane, while the structure is a section, it's a lower projection, upper projection, doorways, etc. We give chronology, phases. If the structure is visible or not, scale, bibliographical reference where this plan has been published before, metadata on the operator who's done the vectorization process and the date when it was done, and of course, elevation data. Seems difficult, but it's an easy way to pass from maps, archaeological or architectonic maps like this, to maps like this, when in different colors, for example, we can render the different phases, while the structure has been reconstructed by the man who did the drawing, or he did see and he recorded what he saw. What the structure is, if it's a lower projection like this scale here, or it's sectioned like that, or an upper projection like this dome structure, etc. And of course the bibliographical record when this map has been published, in order to be able to track the whole process. So everybody can download this vector and he knows exactly where it comes from. So he can enhance it, draw upon it, republish it, and keep track of what's going on. Well, we're trying to vectorize, pass from legacy data like this to vector data like this to be used in georeference GIS platforms, but also in the World Wide Web, like this demo that we have published here. This is the temple of Taposiris Magna with the Coptic church with two different phases inside it. And of course, to be able to render these structures in 2 and 2.5 dimensions. To give an idea of the third dimension, it's not a 3D, of course, but it's 2.5. We are at the present, we are trying to have a full coverage of this kind of information for the whole Coptic, let's say, churches that are known to have been discovered in Egypt. We're about to finish on that. You'll find this information on our website. We are publishing all this GeoJSON data that you can readily use on your GIS platform as a web service, or you can download it for local use. And we're trying to cover and to document like this all the churches and temples of Coptic period. It's not an easy task because many of them have been published by Grossman, etc. But for many others, we lack many information. As I said, this is a very alpha project. We're trying to put together data. We have not put this data yet inside our atlas, but we are planning to do soon because once we have the open data and the vector data, it's an easy task to show them in our atlas. But before we do, we still need to go through a validation of this kind of protocol. It might be usable, etc. And of course, it's not something Egyptian related. This is an agnostic protocol. You can use it for any kind of planimetry published in any cultural or geographical context, maybe Imperial Rome or Greece, etc. It's just a plan, it's just a map, so you can use the protocol to vectorize it. Well, of course, as I said, we need here very much suggestions from the community. So if you are curious about it, if you're working with GIS data, if you're working with legacy data, we're planning to vectorize and publish vector data on legacy-based information. Well, every suggestion or information which is most welcome. So we just file an issue on the open access repository and we'll try to reply. Well, that was the very last. Thank you.
So before we turn off Hangouts, we'll have a few questions and then we'll switch it off and we'll go a little bit more freeform. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to start with, or shall I jump in? Charlotte,
it struck me just looking at your last examples that working on a culture that's embedded in many centuries of cultures, kind of knowing which bits to cover, where to stop, especially geographically speaking. I was thinking you've ended up building that whole temple, but actually your concern is the churches inside the temple, and that, just in terms of volume of effort required, it strikes me as an interesting problem.
Yes, of course. We do have chronological focus. So we do stop at the Coptic church. But as this example shows here, we cannot ignore the temenos of the temple because the church was inside there. So we're recording that data. We don't go deeper on that. We don't give different phases of this Hellenistic enclosure, of course. We just give the present state of preservation. We give it as is. But we do give some diachronical information of the Coptic phases because that's our focus. So on this, we get it in further details. Yeah. On the previous phases, we just say it was there. But if anybody wants to download this, it's more interesting on the Hellenistic phases. Well, of course, you can draw on it and add phases to this vector and push it back. So we get it in this. We can go on minus with phases. Phase 1, 2, 3, but we can go also -1, -2, etc. So it can be expanded, but we don't go too much further backwards at present.
Well, I was thinking it's one of my constant preoccupations. People need to know what you are doing and what you're not.
Yes.
So
yes.
This is not the only place to go if they want to know about this temple.
Yes, of course.
They come
yes,
here
of
to
course.
know about these churches.
Yes, of course.
And that has to be just
right.
Because people get very muddled very quickly.
Right. That's why, but it's not the web version, but we can switch on it afterwards. If you click on this structure, you get a link to the bibliographical resource that was used as a basis for this vectorization. And you can see this is publication by Grossman on Coptic churches. Of course, if you're looking for the Hellenistic temenos, of course, you got to look somewhere else.
Thank you.
We still don't know what we are going to do with this kind of data. We are recording them for the moment, and just think that this is useful for this kind of suggestion.
You want someone else to be doing exactly the same project with the Hellenistic period.
Right.
Someone else.
Yes, it would be great. Yes, of course. We don't have time, and we don't want to do that. But if somebody else wants to fork our repository, add some vectors and push that back, well, it's welcome. We just filter and see the Coptic faces. Somebody filter out the Coptic faces and see the Hellenistic ones, or New Kingdom, etc. So that's the point.
You haven't mentioned going into Egypt and Sudan. I mean, is there a limit to where you're going looking at Coptic manuscripts?
Well, yes, it's mainly Egypt.
Yeah.
We have done some excursions down to Sudan. So we are trying to register some places, some churches in Sudan, some temples, etc. But at present, we will stick in Egypt. But of course, Sudan is very rich in Christian faiths, so it can't be ignored. But let's consider it like a buffer zone. So we do register things, but we don't go through it in a very, very deep manner at present.
But you go to Libya, I see.
Well, it's just a site, a few sites, but we don't have manuscripts from there.
She's implying that you should.
No, I'm just interested. I have to. I'm responsible for it.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
As regards to the internal content of manuscripts, I worked on the 9th century Hamili manuscript, and there are numerous geographical references because inevitably, as with many of the geographical texts, it includes a geographic journey and mentions of monasteries and so on. Are you collating those so that they can be put on that atlas of monastic sites that you want?
Yes, at present, we're not considering text because that would be enormous. But we're considering colophons. So as long as a place or church or etc. is mentioned in a colophon, it is registered. And some efforts are being done to place it on a map. But at present, texts are not being considered because in other projects, many other people, many other parallel projects are working on that, and we are collaborating. But for the moment, only paratexts are. So yes, places where are mentioned in paratexts are being recorded in our database. Not every one of these have an actual geographical position, of course, because.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, the manuscripts actually do give a clue to geographical position in cases. I've got mentions of actual monastic sites, not just where hermits are, but gatherings of monks. So I just think that I hope that will be taken into account later, because I think it may provide a few answers.
So I had a question related to that, as you were talking about when you had your slide about what is a place, and you started with the archaeological definition. So are you in the database recording sites which are archaeologically known to be Coptic, but you don't have a place name associated with?
Of course, yes. Yes. If we know that it was placed a site in a late antique period, it's in our database, of course, even if we don't have a name. Maybe we have KV 34, but
so that people doing detailed work within manuscripts, actually, this is actually a really good resource then for doing this sort of identification work, even if it's out of the scope of your particular project. And I completely understand Charlotte's point of setting the boundaries really explicitly, because there are 1,001 ways in which this could be developed. It's an extraordinarily rich project, I think.
Some other project, for example, that are dealing with text, they are referring to our ideas of places in order to put things together. Would be able, probably in some years, when some points have been achieved and some compatibility issues have been solved, to probably build a map, getting data from different sources, not only from our database, but also from partner projects, etc. Since we share these common references,
But one has to fight against the constant question, why don't you do, people get
Oh,
so excited,
completely.
why don't you do this, why don't you,
Oh, yeah.
why don't you use this?
Well, the thing that I want, yes. Do the thing that I want,
Exactly.
yes.
To which the answer is you do it.
Yes. So, and then when we're doing this sort of geographical work for cuneiform studies, we have a kind of sort of 4-level marker of confidence in attributing ancient toponyms. So how are you handling that sort of confidence question of when you're identifying an ancient site, or is that not, again, or is that outside your scope?
Oh, well, for the major sites, this is not really an issue.
Yes, well,
of course,
obviously,
for
the big
it's
ones, yeah.
very well known from,
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
toponym point
Yeah.
of view, because
Yeah.
we have important study
Yeah.
from Greek and Rome and Egypt, etc. So we usually, this level usually it's enough to us.
Yeah.
When we have cases, the most difficulty is of toponyms that we can't relate anyhow in geography. But this is not an issue because we just can't put a point on a map. So we have some fields when we check the level of confidence of our information. Almost any information that we give does have a source, declaration, where it comes from, and what's the accuracy of the information we provide. So
Easy to give a source, less easy to give the accuracy.
Yes. So I'm also interested in change over time. To what extent then can one go onto the web interface now and go 3rd century, 4th century, 5th century, and look at the evolving geography?
Well,
is that not possible yet?
No, it is possible at present, but the data are not yet too much.
Okay.
So, for example, you can, of course, build a query of, probably we can. But this kind is telling that you will not find yet everything. Probably we have. Here, for example, we have provided, you can build your own, of course, but we have provided some chronological queries. So if you want to see the manuscripts of the 4th century, up to now, they are only 73, well, you can view them on the map. So you can have different maps of different phases from to. But of course, this is not representative yet because only a part of the manuscript has been considered. Well, it is working as a structure, but the data is going to implement. But yes, you can query both sites and both manuscripts. You can build maps from sites and manuscripts for the moment.
I was wondering actually how deeply down you go. I noticed I looked up Coptic, and it simply seemed to be just, the alternative names you offered for it were just Alexandria. And I was just interested in some of these very big places, like Alexandria. So there may be locations inside them. And Alexandria covers lots and lots of different places that might be producing things. So you presumably go as deeply as you can.
Yes.
But if you know it comes from somewhere inside Alexandria, you'll then express that differently.
Alexandria is a special place because I guess we have only one manuscript related to Alexandria, of course, because Alexandria is almost it resembles more to the Western Mediterranean side, of course. It's not a pretty Egyptian place from the climatic point of view, of course. But yes, this has been an issue. It's not solved yet because we are still thinking of the best way to show the different levels of sites. This is an issue, for example, if you go to the Western Thebes, when it's a very well-known place for papyrologists, where almost each tomb has provided some text. And here we are, if you go to Trismegistos, you'll find a unique identifier.
Exactly.
It's a Memnonia, Western Thebes, etc. Well, here we have done a huge work in trying to describe each one of these salmons in its own, because it has provided some testimony for Coptic period, maybe a text, ostracon, or also some graffiti on the walls, etc. And we try to give a full description for this. But Alexandria would be an issue. We started from Alexandria, for example, by giving different ideas for different areas of Alexandria. But then we stopped.
Yeah.
Because it bears no manuscripts at the moment. So it's enough just to have Alexandria as a place.
But this is a very useful example.
Yes.
Very useful.
But Western Thebes, for example, has a totally different detail from this point of view. So, and you can find here, inshallah.
Is hierarchical organization of the geographical
Yes,
location?
yes, we do give upwards reference.
Yeah.
We say this tomb, which is which site? Well, she's the second, refers to Western Thebes. We also have a general identifier for Western Thebes. So
So we can go down.
yes, when we go upwards reference in this case. And what I was saying before is the other periods that you're trying to describe for each one of these sites, from Ptolemaic and late period, New Kingdom, and etc., in order to be able to track the history of each place. But we don't have a strict rule for that. So we add points when we have many information, and then we just give 1 point when we don't.
I have a very simple question. When you say we, how many people are working on the project? It sounds like there are multitudes of you.
No, well, we are about 10 people working on this. Yeah. Different kinds of.
I am just, I'm frankly, hugely jealous. I ran a project between 2007 and 2011 called The Geography of Knowledge in Assyria and Babylonia. And we were kind of trying to do this, but without this technology and without this staff. And I would just love to take you all back in time to September 2007, put you in Cambridge, and with all of this stuff and the things we could do. This is amazing. I mean, it's just extraordinary, really, very impressive.
What I was impressed by was how much of the technology is already in place. So when you answered the question earlier about can you filter by date, well, you can, but the data's not there yet. And so actually no project I've ever worked on has been done that way around.
Exactly.
You have all the data, and then at the end you have all this technology work on it, so then other people benefit from the technology. It's fabulous that you're building the technology.
Well, we spent our first year in just setting up the project. In defining the descriptive protocol of manuscripts and how to describe the site, how to describe colophons, what were the connections between these different entities. We drew this on paper, and then we started. It took a year almost, half of the time that we spent.
But this also helps them to motivate the philologists and the archaeologists to improve the data, because they see the better what it can do, and they also see how bad it looks when they haven't done it yet.
Right.
I think this is probably the point to switch off Google Hangouts and say goodbye to the folks online and move to a slightly more informal sort of chat, possibly liquids as well. Thank you, folks who are online. Before we go, where have we gone? We should say a little bit about next week, just to remind people what next week is. Julian's already mentioned that in 2 weeks' time we'll be coming back to Coptic Egypt to talk about the inks on your manuscripts. We have a Homeric interlude where Georgia Kolovu from the Centre for Hellenic Studies will be talking about translating the Homeric scholia in manuscript Venetus A from text to hypertext. That's on the 12th, same time, same place. Okay, thank you all very much.